welcome back to the next episode of HOOPTOBER. Introductions. So, at the end of the last video I said that the next movie I was going to cover is Audition. I lied. Yeah, for some reason I just decided to watch another horror movie on the list first, and then I ended up watching like 3 movies in that span of time, none of which were Audition. I am getting to that though. I'm not going to say which I'm going to do next, I'm just going to say some of the ones that are on my list coming up to look forward to. Crimson Peak I just added to my list. Psycho 2, and gosh, I think like, let me check. Dead Ringer and Bug. Those are some of the movies you can look forward to. In what order? I don't know, but today we are going to cover 3 movies instead of just 2. And the first movie that we are going to talk about is a little movie called Wreck 2. Record 2. More like this film was a wreck. Seriously though, REC Wreck is the sequel to another film called Wreck, or there's, Wreck 2, Wreck, Record. They're Spanish found footage horror films, and the Hooptober requirements say that I'm supposed to look at sequels, and this was just a movie that I knew had a sequel that I had just never seen before, but a lot of people said it was as good as the first one, and I quite liked the first REC film. I have not seen the American remake. I believe it's called Quarantine, because I heard it's really bad. But I quite enjoyed the first one. It was a very contained experience, a very focused horror movie about some sort of outbreak of something that causes people to turn, into monsters, and the reporter and cameraman who go and investigate it. And I found the movie to be very compelling. It had a lot of good ideas. It's got all the found footage trope, but it had a palpable sense of tension, some good characters. Just for the kind of movie that it was good, and I enjoyed it. It was a good movie. So, I didn't really have high expectations for this. I was just like, it's a horror movie sequel, but I was like, okay, I like an experience that's about on par with the first one, and I almost got that. Almost. See, like, the original movie, again, not exactly a horror masterpiece or anything, but the reason that I'd say that the first movie succeeds a bit more, not like there's a huge differentiation in quality here, that it's not that much. It's more or less has to do with the narrative and the structure. The first one's very simple, very linear, straightforward. This movie tries to, do a whole lot, and I'm happy that this movie at least tried. It could have been stock horror movie sequel, couldn't have tried anything new, it would have been the same thing, and that's never fun. But while I'd say the new ideas that it plays with are interesting, I wouldn't say they're badly executed, but they're not executed in a way that really makes the film that much more interesting. See, what happens is that there's sort of a dual narrative that happens. There's the first part of the movie, which is from this perspective of the members of a SWAT team who go and infiltrate the building from the last movie. And they sometimes encounter other characters that are a bunch of kids, and we don't know why they're in the building, and once that section of the movie is over, we see how the kids get in the building and how they interact, and then eventually they meet up at the end of their stories, and then the third act goes that way. And as a result, I never really had the time to latch on to anybody. There's no real characters here. And again, the characters in the first movie were not like what I would call well-written. but they were likable and engaging in the sense that, like, the reporter, I remember she was really motivated to get what she wanted to do done. She felt like she had a duty. She felt like she had to get this footage, and even when things started to get bad, she was trying to make the best of a bad situation. And the cameraman was a pretty funny guy. But the characters here, I don't really remember them. The SWAT team members, a lot of them, like, die, and then it'll take place from, like, another SWAT team member. They got a little camera on their head, which is interesting. But right off the bat, I feel like you sort of eliminate the threat, because these zombies are not, like... They are revealed to be supernatural. One new thing that this movie did that I thought was okay was the revelation that the zombies were supernatural. And some people think that that kind of ruins the mystery because the first movie didn't do that. It gave you like a little tiny bit. But in order to go bigger, and sometimes you have to lay into that, it's a sequel. It's doing something new. And it laid the groundwork for what could have been an interesting plot, but was ultimately just kind of unengaging just because of the execution. But you have, like, immediately you have this movie where you know kind of what the monsters are because of the last movie, sort of these zombies, like these infected viral things, and you have the first thing that happens is a group, like a SWAT team go in there with a bunch of guns, and it's just like, I'm not really worried about a lot of these guys, and even if they die, it's more or less just like, well, I didn't know any of them. There's a character that shows up very early on in the narrative who's a priest, and if you've seen any horror movie, you can just be like, I wonder where this is going. But then the kids show up, and it gets a little bit better. It picks up a little bit of steam just because kids are more vulnerable, so naturally you're going to worry a little bit more for them, but there's just a lot of sections where I didn't really care about what was going on. There was no real attempt to anchor you into the drama of the movie. And any attempts that they did make kind of fell flat for me. The whole discovery about what was going on in the backstory was fine, but it just didn't really add anything to the movie because it didn't affect any of the characters aside from, like, one. The movie got interesting in the third act. I wouldn't necessarily call it, like, great or anything, but it certainly got better. There's, spoilers, it is a review and discussion of the movie. The girl, the reporter from the last film, is revealed to still be alive. And they have to deal with the priest and talking about the little girl that was found there. And at the very end, there's a lot of cool stuff that happens. Like, most of the characters are dead, but they play around with, like, the ghosts, or the monster, or the demon, or whatever it was. Like, the lights, when the lights were turned off, there were, like, two separate realities that the demon could occupy. And you had to, like, turn it on and turn it off to, like, navigate things. It kind of felt like a video game mechanic, but it was really interesting. I very much liked that, and it sort of ends in just a kind of like, oh, okay, it's over, I guess. And overall, it just didn't really leave me feeling very much. I wouldn't say anything in it is poorly executed. I would say it's a little bit clunky. It's not a very flowing film. It tries to do a lot, but overall, it just didn't really work for me, and that's sad to say because they did try. I would check this out if you were a fan of the first one. If you're not a fan of the first one, this is probably not going to do anything to change your mind, but, it's fine. I didn't regret watching the movie, but it wasn't something that I was like, yes, I am happy that I watched this. It's like a light to maybe decent 5 kind of movie. So, yeah. And the next movie that I watched, thankfully that I enjoyed a little bit more, was Red Eye.
Hi. Is this taken?
No, it's all yours. So are you heading home?
Yeah. Trying. Hi. That's actually my seat.
You're kidding. You're not kidding. The name's Jackson.
Lisa. So what do you do?
As fate would have it, my business is all about you.
I'm not sure where you're going with this.
J.R. Joe Reisert. Your father?
Where did you get that?
Grabbed it off your dad's desk next to your graduation picture. tell the flight attendant, and your dad dies.
Now, you probably haven't heard of this movie. Even if you have, probably don't know much about it. Not exactly a popular movie. But another Hooptober thing is to look at films from specific horror filmmakers, one of which being the notable Wes Craven. And I have kind of a sordid history. If you're one of my Twitter mutuals, you'll probably know this, but I am not a fan of Wes Craven. I am a fan of a lot of what he did, and the spirit that he did it in, and a lot of the ideas that he brought, and he just seemed like a cool guy who did a lot of cool things. He made a lot of movies that paved the way for other successful and interesting films, and I recognize his impact as a filmmaker, but Nightmare on Elm Street 1 doesn't do it for me. I have promised I'm going to rewatch this so I can watch it in better quality, and maybe just give it more of a fighting chance, but I was not a fan of the first movie. I found it to be incredibly dated and unengaging. I didn't find any of the characters to be interesting or gripping. Heather, maybe at the very end when she takes a bit more initiative in the narrative. Just a lot of the filmmaking I found to be kind of not bad necessarily, but boring. The actual presentation of Freddy Krueger felt kind of uninspired and lazy, not in the sense that it wasn't trying to do something new, but in the sense that the way in which it was done just felt very, like he'll just kind of pop out of a dark part of the frame and it'll be like, like a lot of the cinematography felt flat, and I'm sorry, but other than Johnny Depp's death in that movie, the deaths in that film are kind of dodgy, kind of lame in parts. Look, don't at me. I'm a really, really big fan of Nightmare on Elm Street 3. Like, that is not only a favorite horror movie of mine, that's just in the pantheons of some of my favorite movies ever. It's one of my favorite horror fantasy films. Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors. Please go watch that. I might watch that again because I got it on Blu-ray for Hooptober. If you want to see that, maybe I'll give Nightmare on Elm Street and then Nightmare on Elm Street 2 and 3 because I got the dual pack another shot. So, yeah, I'm a really big fan of 3. It's written by Frank Darabont and scored by Angelo Badalamenti. I don't know how to pronounce his name. He did the music for Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, and Twin Peaks The Return, and Twin Peaks Seasons 1 and 2. And yeah, I've also seen New Nightmare, which was a movie that I did enjoy more than the original Nightmare on Elm Street. It has a lot more interesting ideas, and character-wise it's a little bit better, and it's a little bit more interesting, but it's again, the execution of its ideas feels either sloppy or not very thought out well, so, you know, and the Scream movies were movies that I liked a lot when I was younger, when I didn't watch that many horror films, you know, because, you know, it pokes at a lot of tropes. I've seen all of them multiple times at this point, and I don't say I dislike any of them. I'm kind of lukewarm on 3, but I really like 1, 2, and I even kind of like 4, but they've kind of waned over the years as being, like, not dated, because that's not really fair, because they're satirizing a very specific kind of horror film, but the movie just feels a bit too blatant. It's just like, this is what we're doing. Like, beyond the fact that I find, like, the lead really, really engaging, those movies just don't really do it for me. They're a bit too, the scripts are, how I want to say, kind of film student-y. The movies think they're a little bit smarter than they actually are. Not to say I don't enjoy them. If I do enjoy them on a very base level, but overall my experience with Wes Craven's work has been, you know, not really enjoying some of his more lauded works, but kind of being lukewarm to slightly positive on others. So I wasn't, like, super excited going into Red Eye. I just knew it was a movie that not as many people you know, who were fans of Craven had, like, seen, or just being a popular movie in general. I just know I wanted to see it because I was curious. I really like Rachel McAdams and Cillian Murphy, who are the 2 leads in this, and much to my surprise, of the 3 movies that I watched, Red Eye ended up being my favorite. I will be ranking these at the very end, by the way, and I'll probably do a list, or I'll probably throw up a letterbox list of how I rank them. But on that scale, I wouldn't say it's as good as The Wailing or even Evil Dead, in my opinion. But it's better than the movie I talked about previously and the movie I'm about to talk about. But Red Eye is a really engaging movie. A lot of Craven's more, I don't want to say rudimentary, but very tight grasp on tight storytelling is very evident here. The first act, it lets you just sort of see all the cogs of the narrative in motion. You have Rachel McAdams, who is the main character in this, who's going away, I believe, to her mother or grandmother's funeral. And she has to fly away, she gets a late flight, and she meets Cillian Murphy there, who boards the plane with her. And the whole movie is a contained thriller. It sets up a little bit at the beginning, but most of it is a contained thriller on this airplane because Cillian Murphy is basically, I won't spoil anything, but is kind of sort of holding her hostage for nefarious purposes. And as just a movie that is a concept, as a very basic film, it really works. It's a really engaging movie. It's not very long. It doesn't need to be. And I don't have many complaints beyond the fact that, like, it's a really great, really enjoyable popcorn movie with a really strong villain performance with Cillian Murphy, a really great third act that's really exciting, and it goes a bit bigger than I think a movie like this would typically go for something made at the time, which I found very ambitious and appreciated. But everybody gets to show off their acting chops here. Rachel McAdams is very good, very identifiable, pretty good every woman, even if she's like goddess tier beautiful, which is something that makes me laugh in all like 90s horror thrillers, is that the main character is supposed to be this, you know, plucky, relatable main character, but they're all like unfathomably, unrealistically Hollywood gorgeous, and you're just like, you're not a real person, you're fake. But she's still good in it. There's some really effective sequences. There are some really intense nail-biting portions of the movie. There's one narrative thing that I think sets up with a bunch of kids that they have this, they contribute later to the plot in a very specific way, and I think the plot detail was it was too small to really warrant focusing on them as much as they did. They didn't do it a lot, they didn't even really characterize them, they just kept showing these kids, and it's like, okay, how this is going to be reincorporated later. And with that exception, this movie uses the whole Chekhov's gun thing very well. Everything that you see is reincorporated later. I remember there being one unnecessary part of, like, Brian Cox plays her father, and he's being unknowingly watched by someone who works for Cillian Murphy. He's using him as sort of leverage, and it's sort of cut back to him, and there's this part where he like kind of looks around the house, and it's like, we know nothing is going to happen with him until the end, so showing us of him looking around and being suspicious, it's not really doing anything for us. Probably couldn't have been in the movie, but again, it was short. The movie overall is very short. And again, it's not life-changing and it won't blow your mind, but it's got very strong direction. I applaud Craven for taking on an idea like this because, you know, even if it is like an 85-minute long movie, making a movie that predominantly takes place, you know, like the first part's in an airport and then most of it's just like a reverse shot thing on a plane, and then an end that does get kind of crazy and kind of cool, kind of interesting. Good score, too. I remember it very well. The opening credit sequence uses really tacky font. I also remember that. But if you're just looking for an enjoyable, short, good time, a fun thriller, I feel like this was a movie that if I watched it when I was a whole lot younger and grown up with it, it would have been like a personal, not really a guilty pleasure, but just a movie that I'm like, yeah, it's not great, but I'll totally throw it on whenever it's on TV, and if I ever do get to catch this again, I'll absolutely put it on again. Very good movie, very fun movie, engaging movie, well-made movie. Probably my favorite movie Wes Craven has made this far. I'd give it like a decent to strong 6, you know? So yeah, points plus Red Eye. Go see it. Cillian Murphy is really fucking good as the villain, by the way. I didn't sell that enough. He is slimy and creepy and oh god, that third act and it's so good. So fun. Great performance. Very similar to his Scarecrow thing, but a lot more hamming it up. It's super awesome. And now the last movie I've wanted to talk about, which is a movie I've had on my watch list for a long time just because of the talent involved and I've heard things about it. But I've never, no one I know has seen it, so I haven't really gotten, a solid recommendation, and that would be Pumpkinhead.
Looking for an old woman. She lives somewhere in the mountains hereabouts.
All she can do is take you straight to hell. You go home and you bury your boy.
Some folks say as how she's got powers.
Who are you?
Ed Harley.
What do you want, Ed Harley? Say it. You're looking for vengeance. Vengeance. Say it. There's an old graveyard way back deep in them woods. The thing you're looking for is in there.
It was an accident.
It's gotta run its course.
Pumpkinhead is a movie that is directed by Stan Winston, and if that name sounds familiar, it's because Stan Winston does, the practical effects in every movie that has good practical effects, ever. Just ever. There's so many. So, naturally I expected this to be a very effects-driven horror film, and I knew Lance Henriksen was in it. Lance Henriksen of, Aliens fame. He's Bishop, or Aliens. Also Alien. Wait, what? No, he wasn't an alien. What the fuck is wrong with me? He was in Aliens. In Alien 3. I should be shot. But, yeah, Pumpkinhead is, not good. It's not very good at all. How to describe it? It's not good. It's definitely the worst movie I've seen thus far, but I wasn't angry at it. I didn't even technically not enjoy it. I kind of enjoyed it. Not even in a so bad it's good way. It's just it's trying. And by golly, this movie does try. There's so many things, but it is so inconsistent. Oh man, there's honestly a whole lot to talk about. Let's start off with the compliments that I can give it. The lighting, again, pretty much everything I say here about it that's good has a bit of a caveat with sometimes, or until it's not, or is inconsistent. The lighting is fantastic in most scenes. It's dripping with this, Halloween spookiness. This just, these really heavy, bright colors, these autumn colors. Lots of good oranges and reds and nighttime shots. And there are some really well-composed shots, and then there's some really awful shots, too, and scenes where the lighting is super boring. But there is more good lighting and good setup, and probably more good camera work than there is bad. Lance Henriksen is really good all the way through. He's really trying, really putting his best foot forward in terms of performance-wise. If you don't know what Pumpkinhead is about, it's about a guy who grows up, he's kind of in the woods, sort of a redneck kind of dude, and he grows up, and eventually he has a son. I don't think they ever explain what happened to the wife. If they did, I kind of forgot. But, grows up, he's got his son, he raises his son, he's a single father, and one day he is tragically killed in a motorcycle accident that makes, no sense. The kid looked fine. I don't even really know what happened. I think it, knocked him down, and the kid just, died. He was fine for a while, and then he brought him home, and then he died. It was a pretty shot, but... yikes. But yeah, he dies, and in return, he wants to seek vengeance on the people that accidentally killed his son, so he goes to this old witch in the woods and has her conjure up a spirit, a demon called Pumpkinhead that wreaks havoc on these teens and goes and kills them. Now, there's a lot here that, again, I like in theory. One of the things I really like about this movie is that once it gets going, and boy does it take a bit, but once it gets going and the kids who are responsible for the little kid's death, once they are not out of the picture, but once they are in their cabin, when they're all holed up in there, hiding from the consequences of what happened, the narrative paints them in such a way where you don't really hate them. Even the guy who is responsible and does a lot of shitty, awful things, he's painted in such a way that's not sympathetic, but, like, it's not over the top. It's played really straight of just, like, this guy who's got, like, a record, and he's gonna go to jail for a long time, and he's scared, and his girlfriend is scared. They don't want him to go to jail, so they, like, lock their friends in a closet because they don't think that they're gonna stay quiet about the kid dying. And you can tell that it really, like, tears these people apart. Like, they don't just have this dead kid get killed, and like most horror movies, they would just be like, dumb kid should have looked out where he was anyway, and then they'd get murdered by the monster. But no, they're all really, like, mournful of their situation. They all think it's really fucked up, which really just adds to the morality of this movie, because they also do another interesting thing where Lance Henriksen, like, whenever the Pumpkinhead demon kills one of the kids, he sort of feels the physical repercussions of what's happening. I'm not sure if it's because he has, like, a psychic link with it or whatever, but, like, he is in physical pain when the creature kills something. So it sort of adds in the sense that it's like, you feel the toll that it's taking on him, and you do kind of feel for these kids because they're not all responsible and they're acting like actual kids. If they were better actors, that would probably be better too. But see, the setup for all of this is really strong, save for the boy's death. I think that's kind of weak, but everything surrounding that, like the build-up of the whole Pumpkinhead mythology, like him driving to go, it reminds me a lot of the story Pet Sematary by Stephen King, and this is slightly better than the Pet Sematary movie. I mean, at least somebody gave a shit. You can tell that there are lots of parts where just, like, there's so much energy in the filmmaking, and then, oddly enough, where most horror movies would pick up, Pumpkinhead just sinks. When the monster shows up and starts killing these kids, this movie becomes a clusterfuck. And I don't mean clusterfuck of, like, narrative or character, I mean filmmaking-wise. I don't know the proportions of this monster very well. I don't know the anatomy of it. I don't know how it moves, how it works, how it kills people. Like, sometimes it'll just, like, impale somebody or throw somebody through a window and they'll just be dead. But, like, sometimes it'll, like, grab them and lift them up, but, like, it can't fly, and it wasn't, like, hanging from a tree. Like people just die, and, like arms will just come in from off-screen and then pull these kids away, and you're like, where did that come from? And it's not very well executed. Like, there are some shots, like there's a shot when the demon first gets resurrected and Lance Henderson's looking at it, and the practical effect on it looks great. And there's some shots where the practical effects look great, and other shots where you're just like, oh man, you didn't think this out, did you? And it's so strange. Like, the first half, while nothing terribly original happens, it had enough. You know, there's, like, with horror movies, if you do something well and with enough originality, you can hold me. But yikes, the execution is just so sloppy. Pumpkinhead is a movie that, like, I was watching, I was like, there's all these good ideas and all these things you could work with. Like, if I ever got to remake a horror movie in the future, I would totally remake Pumpkinhead because there's so much good there. The monster, when it does, like, when the practical effects are good, looks kind of goofy sometimes, but it still looks good, but, you know, except when it doesn't. And the kids, their acting is okay, except when it isn't. And the cinematography is great for the first part. For the second part, it's okay until it isn't. And honestly, like, this movie just has a lot of good ideas, and it just sort of fizzles. And it just makes me want a good version of this story, because there's so many people. Like, can you imagine what somebody like Guillermo del Toro would do with a concept like this? Like, oh, there's so many good ways to write great characters, great narratives, great, like, morals into this and make this a really fascinating story or fable, and it just doesn't do any of that. And I was disappointed just because the movie did have potential. It was not like through lack of trying, but man, it sure was through lack of execution. So Pumpkinhead gets kind of a generous light to decent 4 from me. It's the worst movie I've watched so far, but I can't really say I regret watching it. I didn't really ever find myself being angry or even sad or upset. But yeah, this was the second Hooptober vlog. That was 3 movies, and I'll see you all next time. I think the next one I'm going to watch is Crimson Peak. I'm not entirely certain about that, but it'll probably be, and maybe Audition, who knows. So, I will see you all in the next episode.